Okay, let's talk about the revolt of the masses. Um, so I want to start this with my essay, essay or my interpretation of the mass man. And I'm going to say first, this is just an interpretation of the mass man. This is actually more than what Ortega says. I had to add some stuff myself to flesh out what I think the mass man is, and you'll know when I'm adding, probably, if you've read along, um, and you'll see a lot of Eric Hoffer jumping in to help me out a little bit. So please, yeah, take this as only an interpretation of the mass man. All right, so. So last time we talked about the fundamental changes in the 18th, 19th, and up to the beginning of the 20th century. They gave birth to a new type of man. So at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, the world and life opened up to a tremendous amount of new possibilities due to advances in liberal democracy, human rights, and what he calls technicism, just technology. But in the face of these nearly infinite possibilities, the average man began to shut himself up within his own soul. This was the event Ortega calls the rebellion of the masses. The rebellion of the masses is an attempt to escape the terrible burden of being responsible for one's life. The type of man that emerged from the rebellion was the mass man. The mass man is someone who identifies with and holds up as the highest state that which in himself is undifferentiated from other men, that which he shares in common with others, with everybody. In other words, he sees that which is best in him as that which is not individual. This shows his contempt for the individual, or for himself as an individual, and for being different in general. He demands nothing special of himself, and he is satisfied with himself as he is. This is because his effort as an individual does nothing to get him closer to what he truly desires, which is to leave behind his uniqueness and individuality and belong to the group. Ortega tells the story of a woman from Madrid he met who told him that she couldn't stand a dance to which, or she wouldn't attend a dance to which less than 800 people had been invited. She wants to be part of a group. She wants to be part of everyone. And she doesn't think it's even worth going if there are few people there. She's kind of like the religious person who replies to the atheist by saying, "But being an atheist won't make you happy." Truth is no longer in question. Comfort is. As Ortega says, the mass man does not think of himself as super excellent. He holds that he has a right to be vulgar as he is. The point for the mass man is not to be excellent, but to find comfort in being one of the group. And so this is the mass man in general, I think. And I listed some of the dangers of the mass man. So one of the most important dangers is the mass man is inherently illiberal. So liberalism, we're going to say, is the attempt to live in common with those who neither think nor feel as we do, especially when we are in the majority. As Ortega says, it's a kind of supreme form of generosity. But those who are mass cannot accept difference. The very existence of another possible way of life makes him anxious. It says to him that another way of life is possible and reminds him of his responsibility for his own way of life. The mass man does not want to share life with those unlike him. He hates all that is not himself or part of his group. When the mass man says he wants to be like everybody or be part of everybody, he does not really mean everybody. He means the mass alone and not unique or minority groups. And next, the mass man is anti-intellectual. The intellectual is in pursuit of the truth. To pursue the truth means submitting to the authority of reason, of finding reasons and thinking through alternative explanations. The mass man simply is not interested in the truth game. He does not want to put the truth in checkmate. He instinctively repudiates the idea of there being an authority outside of him, as Ortega says, because his criterion of truth is within. Something is true for the mass man if it makes him feel like part of the group or puts him at ease. And my last criticism, or my last danger of the mass man, is the mass man, because he has abandoned reason, because he has abandoned the intellectual, is violent. He doesn't want to reason. He doesn't submit to a standard that would maybe, he doesn't submit to the standard of reason, because all his highest standard is to be part of the group. So violence is the only thing left for him to convince others of his way of life. Okay, that's it. It's the mass man and his dangers, I think.
The base standard they've chosen, that's kind of what I want to talk about, because Ortega says they have no standards, no authority to appeal to, nothing. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, so I kind of was thinking, so what would, but they appealed to something, right?
That's what I mean. I agree. Yeah.
They don't appeal to nothing. It's just that they appeal to something else that's not the truth.
Yeah.
They don't appeal to reason or the truth. I think the only standard that they can appeal to is sheer force of will, just brute force, number, and size, right? Just gigantic size. Look how big this is. Look how powerful. Look how many of us there are. Like, we have to be right because there's so many of this or that. Or just raw force. I mean, it seems like when reason goes away, that would be the only thing you could actually use to prove that your view or your way of living is right, which is kind of, I think, why modern arguments tend to be so shrill. It's because I think some of these people feel like deep down that all they're doing is just bumping their wills against each other. I mean, like, if arguments were really to get at the truth, you would find yourself getting angry a lot less, I think. I mean, why would you get upset in a discussion or outright angry if all you were thinking was, I'm on a scientific effort to find the truth here. We're on a platonic dialogue to find the truth, right? Why would that make you upset unless you had a kind of a different fear, right? That it wasn't truth that you were after in the first place.
Wow.
No.
Hey,
That's
shut up.
No,
You had your
up.
35 minutes. Shut up.
This isn't your
This is
show,
what this guy
Bill.
does.
Bill,
This is
you
what
can
he
tell
does.
me. You can't
all
tell.
right? This is what he
Take
does.
control, Pat. Come on.
Speaking of Plato, it's exactly the conversation that comes up in the Meno. Socrates says the same thing about the gods. Which arguments do you suppose they get angry over? Not mathematical ones. One's about virtue. One's about excellence. These are the arguments people really get angry about.
Yeah. I mean, if you just think about it, yeah, you would. I mean, if someone came up to you and said 2 + 2 is 5, you'd be shocked, but you wouldn't be angry.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess maybe the thing is, though, and we kind of talked about this before when we were talking about Plato, but there's no, people will not agree on a criteria, an outward criteria. People do not agree on an outward criteria for correctness a lot of times, and they fall into this kind of pessimism regarding rational dialogue because nobody will agree on a criteria, and then just like, oh, you're brainwashed. No, you're brainwashed. All right, well, let's go home. We're all brainwashed.
There's a couple of interesting quotes I wanted to read, too, from this one, too. There's a lot of really just great.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this one just bears repeating. Okay. This is for you, YouTube. Okay. That man is intellectually of the mass who, in the face of any problem, is satisfied with thinking the first thing he finds in his head. So all those first response videos are like, what? Yeah, that's all you, right? He continues here. It's even worth following what he continues to say. On the contrary, the excellent man is he who condemns what he first finds in his mind without previous effort and only accepts as worthy of him what is still far above him and what requires further effort in order to be reached. So, I mean, if you take that idea and kind of just extend it out, I mean, isn't what he's really saying here is that, in a strange way, your first instincts aren't necessarily you,
Mm.
right? I mean, like, if you grow up with, he says that the mass people, all they have in their head is just this kind of shared stock of ideas that they get from somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, people in charge now are big business owners, the government, propagandists, basically. They know how to put those stock of ideas in your head. Right? They know very well how to associate things. You know, oh, look, you have a big car. That means you have a big penis. Okay, I get it now. Right? But they're very good at making very subtle associations in your mind. And so to the point where maybe your first response isn't actually you. I mean, isn't that a scary thing?
I love this point, and I have to say, because Schopenhauer is our mark for this Tokyo Philosophical Society. This is a point Schopenhauer made in The World as Will and Representation. It's a point I love. Yes, you got to dig down deep. You got to, maybe, as Schopenhauer said, you got to use your intellect to dig through your desires and find out who you are, because they don't represent you sometimes. I know it's a hard point to get through, but maybe your first instinct was wrong.
Yeah.
If you gave it a little thought, you wouldn't do it, because that's not how you really want to act. That's not how you really want to be.
I mean, I love that thought, and it's also just, it frightens you to that. And I think it's true even of myself, that sometimes my first reactions to things and to people are simply not mine, in the sense that, I didn't think them out. They were just handed to me on a plate, and I just accepted them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get all technical, sure, it's me, but it's not myself. So I think it's something that bears repeating, and I think YouTubers have to be especially careful about this.
Yeah. I also, I don't know, sometimes, Japanese TV strikes of this too, where they put all the faces on the screen, and then they show you something, and you got to get that face shot, like the first reaction face shot. Oh, it's so cute. Oh.
I mean, the whole ideology of this is, like, your first reaction is the most real reaction you have, right?
Yeah.
And that anything after that is a bunch of, kind of calculated planning or something. I mean, as if, like, you, the person you make to be you, can't be thought out or something.
Yeah.
Like, you can't be a thought out project. You have to be just this mess of instant reactions, and that's all you really are. And you can't be anything more than that, because that is being, hypocritical. Right?
Exactly. Like reason or thinking things through is just a facade laid over the true you, which is kind of bubbling up in your first reaction, kind of smoothed over later by, your brain is invaded by the PC demons of society. And,
right.
that's all lies come out of your mouth later, because you're just worried about your friends and your family and society and what people are going to say. But that first reaction, that captured the truth of you.
Right. I mean, and then there's people in Japan, they often say this too. I mean, that, like, doing a good deed feels hypocritical, right? Because you have to force yourself to do it. But that's kind of what a good deed is. That's what a good deed is. I'm sorry to tell everybody this, but maybe we didn't remember that. Like, you have to force yourself to be good. And that is the real you. The you that forces yourself to be good, that's not hypocritical.
Yeah.
That's what a good deed is.
Exactly. I mean, if we weren't, this goes back to Plato, but if we weren't divided morally, if we weren't divided in our thoughts, what would be the point of moral thought at all? We would just act, right? I mean, it's because we have split thinking about things that we think in moral terms, and we think in terms of should. And, if you choose the should, you did something good.